Okay, so I'm going to show you some warm-up exercises to get you used to using a broad edge nib. There's a little bit in the booklet there about nib angles. The angle that you hold the nib at will be different depending on the style of calligraphy that you're doing. For the warm-up exercises, I want you to see the lines at their thinnest and thickest. So if you can hold the pen or the nib rather at 45 degrees, so it's not how you're actually holding the pen, just hold that as you regularly hold it. But what you want is for the flat metal part of the nib to be running parallel with that line there. So you don't want it to kind of be askew like that. You want it running nice and flat along at 45 degrees. So it's sometimes useful just to kind of keep that handy when you're writing in case you feel your nib angle's gone off a little and you can just reset it. And then what will happen when you do an upstroke is you will get the thinnest possible line. So you're just doing a diagonal stroke from left to right, pulling the pen. So imagine that the right hand corner of the nib is pulling the left hand corner behind it. And you'll get the thinnest stroke. Some of mine have gone a little bit wonky there, I do apologise, but you'll see there you've got a really thin stroke. If you come down over, so you're still holding that nib at 45 degrees, but if you come down over, that produces a thicker line. So when it comes to doing the letters, as you're holding that nib angle steady, the strokes will become thick and thin. I'm just going to steepen that a little. So that is basically the premise behind how the broad edge pen works. So for the warm-up exercises, again, keep it at 45. If you need to go across and check, bring it back to the page. So you can do some vertical strokes just from the top to the bottom. So with the right hand corner of the nib touching that top line, going straight until the left hand corner of the nib touches the bottom line. So don't worry about this white space here, because that's what we're looking for. If you haven't got any white space, you're probably just holding the nib too flat. So twist it and get it back on that 45-degree slant. So I've shown you the upstrokes and the downstrokes diagonally. You can have a little go at putting them together. So you can do an upstroke and a down, and up and a down. So you'll see it's going from thin to thick. You can do those in a more kind of pyramid shape. So little triangles as you go. Have a little go at some curves. So coming just up to the line, curving it and bouncing it off the bottom one. So it goes thin, thick, thin. And have a little go with some crosses as well. So this will be the one where you're really tempted to kind of twist the pen and maybe make that a little flatter. Just keep it at 45. Down stroke and a cross stroke in the middle. And then that'll just hopefully get you used to holding the broad edge pen steady, and then we'll move on to the letters. Okay, so I've got the guidelines drawn up already here for the pen that I am using. The first group of letters are clockwise arches, so there's the I, the A, the R, the N, the M and the H. So for your letters, your nib needs to be at a 30-degree angle. So if you need to check it, you can just run it along the guide sheet there. Just check it's flat as you go in. And then once that nib is set, you can start writing. So there's the I. So that is just a straight line from the top of the X height to the bottom of the X height with a dash above. So you're just bringing the pen up to the line and bouncing it off. So you'll see here, these are nice and curved. It's not a kind of spiky pointed movement like that, where you've got more of an angular. The foundational hand is based on the square and the circle and kind of the roundness of shapes. So you're just keeping that curve rather than a point. Of course you can dot your eye a little thicker if you wanted to as well. The A, you are bringing that initial stroke of the eye out further round and down, and then just picking that back up in the middle to form the ball of the A. So the foundational hand letters, you're building them up through a series of strokes. Now what you want to make sure for that ball of the A is that you're lifting it up. So you'll see there you've got the thick strokes and the thinner strokes that you get from keeping that nib angle steady. Then there's the R, so there's the I stroke, and then the arm of the R. And again, keeping that arch shape, so not starting it there, starting it just below the line, as if you're coming up in the same way that you do with the A. And the N, just like the R, but then you're coming all the way down to the bottom of the X height. That's actually gone a little bit wider, that one. So hopefully you can see that these are all fitting quite nicely into a square shape. And the M, which doesn't fit into a square shape, that's the wider letter because you have got these two arches, so it's the end of the arch with an extra arch added. M. And then finally the H, so the H starts at the top of the ascender, comes down to the X height, and then again starting about halfway up, bringing that roundness up to the top of the X height, keeping these nice and parallel. Okay, so the next group of letters are your circular letters. So you'll see some really circular round shapes here, so you don't want them to look too oval. So the O, split in two halves. So you come down from the X height, round. When it starts to thin out again, just go back to the beginning and close the circle. Two strokes, come up nice and wide, so you get a nice round O rather than an oval shaped O. B starts in the ascender, comes down, and as you start to get towards the bottom of the X height, just pull the pen round to the right so that you've got a really nice rounded stem coming off there, so it fits in with the circular movements, so you haven't got a right angle there, it's nice and curved. The P is simply an I stroke, but going from the top of the X height down to the bottom of the descender. Again, that little kind of crescent moon sort of shape from the top of the O, and then just finishing off with a third stroke there. So the reason for that being, your pen should always be going from top to bottom, left to right. If you tried to do that all in one go, you'd feel the resistance between the pen and the paper, so you can kind of hover over just to get the curvature right, but you're pulling it back from left to right. And again, just making sure that that ball of the P is nice and round, nice and circular. You've got the C. So again, it's that little half moon shape, that first stroke of the O, and then you're not closing it, you're keeping that open for the C shape. And then the E follows the same pattern, but you are looping it round to the middle of that first stroke to form the E. The D starts with the C stroke, and then for the downward stem, trying to catch both of those as you come down. So you can kind of hover your pen, so you've got a starting point in the ascender and then just come down. Q, same beginning, C shape, little pen touch for a little serif, and then down. C stroke, touch of the pen coming in from the right, down, and then just lifting it off. It's not a deliberate kick of a Q. And then the G, it's kind of a smaller O and a larger O, I guess, if you like, on top of each other. And then just adding a little serif at the top. Okay, so the next group of letters are your diagonal letters. There's the K, V, W, Y, X and Z. There's a little bit of twisting the nib here so that you can steepen it to get thinner strokes on certain letters. But your K, you do just keep it at that 30 degrees throughout. So your K is coming from the top of the ascender down through the X height to the bottom of the X height. Little loop of the K, just like on the A, and then kicking out. So that's first stroke, second stroke, and then you're kicking out from underneath the ball of the K or the loop of the K. If you try and kick out from the stem, you're going to create a bit of a mess there. So just when you kick out, just make sure you're kicking out from underneath the loop of the K. Now the V, the W and the Y, this is where you need to steepen your nib angle. So 30 for that first stroke, and then just steepen up to 45 for the second. And same with the W, you are steepening it on the second and the fourth stroke. So 30, 45, it's sometimes easier to go from top to bottom as well for those ones. 45 on the fourth stroke there as well. And the Y, 30 degrees, steepen just so you get a thinner stroke as you come down. And with the Y you can come down with a curve, you can come down a bit straighter with more of a point to the end. The X is one where it's really handy to think of that square. So you're thinking of the four corners of a square. So your first stroke goes from the top left to the bottom right, and your second stroke goes from your top right through the middle to the bottom left. And then the Z, technically speaking, you should flatten the nib so it's at 0 degrees, so you get the thickest possible diagonal stroke, but I actually prefer to do it all in one because I think you get a much nicer contrast between the thick and the thin strokes. Okay, so the last 6 letters of the alphabet, we've got the related curves, F, G and S, and anti-clockwise arches, which are your L, T and U. So the F, you start in the ascender, but you're not coming up to the line, you're dropping down from the line. And then the arch of the F and the cross stroke. So again, just make sure that your nib is at 30 degrees. And the F is a little bit thinner, so you know you can't. The arch of the F isn't too wide. J, just again coming up to the top of the X height, and then as you're coming in the descender, you move the pen to the left, and it just creates that natural point. So nice and straight, and then just moving to the left. And again, if you wanted to do a thicker dot for your J, you can. The S, so people tend to find the S is the trickiest in any calligraphy script. And the trick is really to get that curve right. So how I usually form it, or how I usually think of it, is a little half an O, a little pit to keep it straight, and then the other part of the curve. So small as if you're going to do an O, bring it flat, curve it round again, and I find that that just helps to keep the letter upright rather than doing a curve all in one go like that, where you might end up with a more slanted or more sloped S. And the L, basically just the kind of first stroke of the B. So from the top of the ascender, down, round, and then just lifting it up until it starts to go thin again. The T's got a lovely little trick to it where you start just below the line, go just above the line, come down and round, just pick it back up there for the cross stroke of the T. So the way you do it is, so the right hand corner of the nib touches the line, come up diagonally so the left hand corner of the nib touches the line, down and round, and just pick it back up, and then you get a cross stroke there with no white inside. If you try to do it but started below and above, you can see there you end up with the white line there, so that little trick just stops that from happening. And then the U is an eye stroke, kind of elongated at the bottom there, and then an eye stroke for the stem of the U.